Oh, hey, friends. Happy whatever day it is. I have no concept of time anymore. Time's different in the UK, in fairness. So Andy and I have been in here working on this project all week. I know I haven't really updated you guys, but, you know, it's still half vacation.
And the whiskey helps.
And the whiskey, and good whiskey at that. So I want to dive into what we're doing because there are some really advanced and complex things happening here. And at the end of the day, I mean, you know, that's why you guys are on my Patreon anyway. So let's touch base on what's happening. So here's the goings on. Right now, we're doing a bunch of bent laminations, obviously. But what we wanted to do, we've got all of these. This is the last set still in clamps that we have to do. We wanted to do some tapered laminations so that at the bottom of this, what's eventually going to be a coffee table, these feet are a little heavier. They taper up to here. And that way, let's see, this is our poplar iteration. Starts a little thicker down here, gets a little thinner up top, and it just has this really graceful, sexy line to it. So there's a number of ways that you could do that. Andy and I were discussing whether or not to do straight lamination and just cut through, which is absolutely a possibility, but a little bit more of an advanced step is to taper each lamb. And so the first question is, well, how do you do that? So this is a tapering sled. We made two of them because we have two separate legs, a short leg and a long leg, or I should say a short leg assembly and a long leg assembly. And so really all this is you do the math to figure out how thick you want the bottom and how thick you want the top. You divide it over the number of laminations that you have, and then you figure out what the differential is that needs to be for each lamb. So in this case, we wanted to go from about 5 mil to about 7 mil. So it's a 2 millimeter differential between one end of the sled and the other, and same on that sled. The reason we had to have two sleds is because they're two different lengths, and so that angle is going to be slightly different across those two. It's a very, very simple sled. Basically, I made this first rib, and then I glued and tacked this piece on, template routed, glue and tack, template route, glue and tack, etc., etc. And tag teaming that with Andy has been very efficient. So that's step one, and then you can come over here and glue up all of your laminations and get all of your different leg components so that we can start to talk about joinery, because that's the next step. That's been one of those things we've talked about at length is once you have curvy components, how do you register where things live and you're not just floating out in space? So this is how you do it. First and foremost, full scale drawings. So underneath here, I should say this is the template that I made my bending forms from, right? And that came from a full scale drawing. And then I took that and I made the actual cross section of what the legs are gonna look like, which then allows this full scale drawing to give me a bunch of information. Number one, where this half lap is gonna fall so that we can make a proper half lap router jig, which we'll get into in a minute. But secondly, it also gives me the ability to make a squaring jig. So I'm going to take each of those legs, I'm going to put it right on here. Oh yeah, I forgot about the prototype part.
We had before, we also had.
Yeah, we made full-scale prototypes out of cardboard so that we have some idea of whether or not this design is going to work. So that's what it's going to look like in the end. So that's the half lap in there, obviously, and then we're going to miter these corners together. We had to have two different sleds so that the thickness of each of those components where they meet up is the same. Otherwise, our miters aren't going to align. Thank you, sir. Much obliged. That's a good visual.
You also forgot the paving slab. That's part of the design process.
All right. So when we started this, we were going through the design. That'll be part of the YouTube video. But when we started this, we were trying to discuss what size it was, and Andy literally just got up and walked out of the house and grabbed a giant patio paver and brought it in, and he just puts it on the floor and he goes, "That's how big it should be." You know?
But then also, like, we then measured it and it was like 800 by 600.
Yeah.
And you said, that's perfect.
It's a perfect 3 to 4 ratio. So, you know, there it is. That's how it works. So once we joint and thickness these, this is going to line up to my center component here. That is going to allow me to register this piece, and then I can square off the bottom and square off the top, clamp these down obviously, and that's going to allow me then to give me a registration point so I know both legs, when I go to cut both of these, are flush with the floor. That makes sense? Am I saying words right?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're finding words this morning.
Words are hard sometimes, man.
Easy.
So, that all being the case, once we have that information down and we have those components squared up, then it's a question of how do we cut these half laps? So I think this is a really good conversation to have with Andy because sometimes we were just discussing, sometimes you just forget what you know and you just do things and then it's like, oh yeah, that might need explaining. So let me grab one of those. All right, buddy.
You're not having the cat.
It doesn't have a face, man.
It doesn't have a face, but it has a thistle.
Visually appealing. Fair. So, the jigs to do our half laps are pretty simple jigs, right? I mean, fundamentally.
You look at it now and it looks simple.
Right,
because it's 3 bits of MDF just thrown together.
Right, and so the question is, how do you do that? And 2, how do you do it accurately? Yeah. What we've got is this registration point on the inside will line up with our pencil marks for our half laps. This face is curved to match the curve of the leg. Place it in, and I'll bevel these out so we can just clamp them in 2 spots, and then we can route. The question is, how the hell do you figure that out? There's a piece of paper on that workbench. If you could grab that for me. This is where having those full scale drawings becomes not even invaluable. Like it's necessary when you're dealing with these types of components to figure out where things exist in real space. So thank you, sir.
It looks so Heath Robinson.
I don't even know what Heath Robinson is, but I trust you. I've definitely, these look like Heath Robinson, if I know Heath Robinson at all. But all this is a tracing of these full scale drawings that I've done. And that gives me kind of 4 exit marks that I can map out on the underside of my jig. And once I've got those aligned, then I know exactly where this arc falls. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I mean, it maybe just we did debate a number of different ways as to how we do those half laps.
That's an excellent point.
So you had that immediate sense of, like, I just wonder whether we create a template route and route them out with a bearing guided bit. But we discussed cutting them by hand. Mm-hmm. You had that rough guide that if you're doing more than 4.
Yeah, generally, so making this router jig probably took me 3 to 4 hours. And the second one will take less time because I figured out the process for getting this made accurately. So I've got the other one in process right now. So let's call it 6 to 7 hours. Let's just call it a full day. So let's say it takes me a full day to make these 2, and then it takes me 2 hours to cut the half laps today. So 10 hours total. If I'm cutting 4 half laps in 2 pairs of legs, it's probably going to take me a little less than a day, right? 3/4 to a full day. If I'm cutting 8, that's like a day and a half of work. Maybe it takes 2 days by the time you have to, because they're curved shoulders, so you got to deal with that. Convex shoulder is one thing, but dealing with a concave shoulder is another thing. I got to break out the gouges and start chiseling down. It is a path of diminishing returns at some point to do them by hand, unless that's the thing you want to do. Anything else?
When we finish off making this jig, because there's an interim step, wasn't there, in terms of going from this to that, was another step.
Yes.
Because obviously this one right now doesn't have all of this stuff and doesn't have this on it.
Right.
So maybe we talk through that, or maybe show a little bit as we do.
Yeah.
Because that's a step in its own.
This step right here is a good thing to chat about very briefly anyway, because again, once I've mapped it out using the paper and given myself my points, then the question is, we have positive templates, so I could make another positive by just simply template routing it, but how do I make a negative template? And this is one way to do it, just pulling some scraps. And I've shaped these two faces to match my template perfectly, and then just give myself a couple of stops out here. These are just double stuck down, so when I go to route that out, that's going to create that negative space here. And then in order to realign this shoulder to this groove, what I've already done is pre-drilled this side of the template, so I can just pop those screws back in, and it should auto align, and then we can check for fit.
I mean, the other thing that's worth pointing out is we've used about a gazillion sheets of MDF.
Sure. We've got 1 inch MDF, we've got 1/4 inch MDF, we've got this green interior
18.
MDF, 18 mil, we've used 15 mil, we've got sleds, we've got forms. Making curvy wood takes a lot of sheet goods, and that's why, that's the one reason why I do keep chipboard in the shop, because it's cheap. But yeah, it eats up a lot of material, man.
Got a lot.
It does. All right.
Did you want to talk maybe later about the forms, or have we already done that?
Well, let's get those out of clamps, and we can talk about that as we pull the clamps out. So, for these bending forms, they were made the exact same way that I made the tapering sleds. I made that full-scale drawing, pulled the 1/4 inch template, which is now the guide for those squaring sleds, and template routed the first piece. And then it was a series of glue, tack, template route, until we got to the point where we had enough thickness to glue up 2 legs at the same time. And that's exactly the right response. The amount of clamps that we need to get these things clamped properly to the form. Time and clamps quickly realized that we don't have enough resources to glue up 4 legs at the same time. So what we've done is we glued 1 pair up in the morning, 1 short, 1 long, came back in the evening, did it again. Same thing yesterday, so that way, after 2 days, we have 8 legs.
But we also, like the alignment, like lining it all up, because we've had about 5 to 10 modifications of these forms as we've gone along.
Yep.
We've drilled out, Eric's made a huge mess repeatedly of Forstner bits on the MDF to create these clamping areas. We've screwed in a load of blocks so that we've at least got something to push against as we try and, as a tag team that. We've added these supports here so that this slippage doesn't...
So the laminations aren't sliding over one another, because of course, let's say for every 1/8 of an inch of slippage across the width of the laminations, you're losing twice as much. And then, as you were saying, adding more holes so that we could get more clamps at the right location and get the pressure right to make sure the lines were closing up. We did that mid-glue up yesterday. But that's fine. That's what you do in order to get the job done properly.
And I think we've got pretty slick, like working the clamping solutions out as to, okay, we start in the middle with a big boy.
Yep.
We sort of ease over here. We then sort of come off with a strongish F clamp and replace the big boy in the middle.
Yeah.
And we got that dance got much slicker.
Right.
We got coordinated.
And that's that process as, you do a thing over and over and you learn what works and what doesn't, right?
Yeah. The other bit of mod as we went through was giving ourselves a little checklist, because we had one the other night where we got it all clamped up and we got it the wrong way round, so we then had to redo that. Yeah, right way round, get the check. We then also had calls.
Yep.
Because we also
clamped one up without calls. And the calls, to be clear, those are doing two things. Number one, they're preventing marring on the outside face, which is always good. But more importantly, they're spreading that clamping pressure so that over the length of that lamination, that clamping pressure is hitting the entirety of the lamination rather than creating little bubbles of pressure.
And then the other thing, just to strike off the center point, so that as we were clamping down, if there was slippage along the length, we could tweak that so that the curves were all registering in the same way.
Right. That's an important thing. Again, right here, just kind of just a little pencil mark. It doesn't even have to be super accurate, but because these are tapered, number one, they're going to want to slip because you're putting pressure on a wedge, and that wedge is going to want to do that. But also, if there is a substantial amount of slippage across the length, then those bits are going to end up being different thicknesses at the end, and that's going to affect the way our miters close up and look. But yeah, we're going to joint one face. We're going to run them all through the thicknesser so they're the same width, and then we can go about squaring up and doing our joinery. So we've got today. I leave tomorrow morning, and right now we're post glue up stage, so it's going to be a hustle today.
But we've done a load of the hard yards in terms of jigs, etc.
Yes.
So
we've set ourselves up to be efficient.
It's much more about turning the handle.
Yes. So those efficiencies are.
And we had to find out some dances about how to use the dust extraction.
The jiggery piggery, as it were.
Yeah. Pokery.
Jiggery pokery. That doesn't even rhyme.
Jiggery piggery.
You can go hokery pokery, or you can go jiggery piggery.
That summons up all sorts of inappropriate images. Jiggery piggery.
I don't even know what the hell that means, but I can imagine.
Yeah, you don't want to.
All right, let's do some woodworking.